What's up, and welcome in to the Berryman Breakdown. I am your host, Brian Berryman, here to break down Week 1, Game 1 of the NFL season. Man, that feels good. We made it, guys. All those long, hot summer days. Just wishing we could crack open a cold one, throw in some DFS lineups, and watch the Thursday night football game. We did it. We're here. Week 1 of the NFL season. I'm super excited to be breaking down this game for you guys between the Los Angeles Rams and the Buffalo Bills, two absolute juggernauts from last season, both of which who were top 10 in DVOA on both sides of the ball last season. This is just going to be a great game, and what a way to open up the NFL season. So every week, I'm going to be bringing you guys a short, quick video breaking down my thoughts on the Thursday night football game in relation to the Showdown slate. These videos are going to be focused on GPP tournaments, not so much cash game thoughts. And the goal of the video is for you to walk away with a solid understanding of how the game is expected to play out, some different tributaries on how things may be able to go astray from that expected path, and how we might be able to capitalize on those different paths in order to get to first place. Obviously, at the beginning of the NFL season, I want to reiterate this, projections are extremely fragile. There's no week that we know least about throughout the rest of the season than week 1. There's changes in the offseason. There's changes in the coaches. There's so much different from last year compared to this year. And we really want to take advantage of the fact that these projections right now just aren't that great. Obviously, we know who the studs are on each team, but don't put too much stock into projections early in the season, as we just don't know the complete picture that we will know 2 to 3 months from now. So I want to get into the game, and specifically we will start off by talking about the major changes that were made to each team throughout the offseason. So starting off with the Buffalo Bills, if 4 or 5 pretty big moves. First, they signed Von Miller, the edge rusher, obviously an elite talent coming off the edge, which is going to give them some nice pass rushing upside and add to this defense, which was already fantastic last year. So big signing there. And then combined with defensive end Shaq Lawson, the combination of those two coming off the edge are going to spell trouble for offenses and really makes this Bills team extremely dangerous on the defensive side of the ball. They did lose Cole Beasley, so they tried to replace him by signing wide receiver Jamison Crowder. He's a little bit, I would say, towards the end of his career, I guess is safe to say. He's had a great run, with the Jets, but he's not going to be the same player, in my opinion, that Cole was last year. He has and will be competing with Isaiah McKenzie for that spot that was left by Beasley's departure. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We can talk a little bit more about that later on in the video. And the last big move, the Bills drafted running back James Cook, which is going to add to an already muddied situation at running back for the Bills. So let's move on to the Rams, who had some nice moves. The first, they signed wide receiver Allen Robinson from the Bears. He should be filling in for that Robert Woods OBJ role for the wide receiver 2, opposite of Cooper Kupp. I think that's a really strong sign for the Rams, and I'm excited to see what Allen Robinson can do in a legit offense with a legit coach and a legit quarterback for really the first time in his career. Next big move, they signed linebacker Bobby Wagner, who's obviously been a great contributor in Seattle for many years, who will solidify the center of that defense. They did trade away Robert Woods, as I mentioned, with the signing of Robinson. That was to help replace Robert Woods in this offense, and they they did not re-sign OBJ. So those were the major moves. We also had some coaching changes on both sides of this game. We'll start off, Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator last year with the Bills, left and took the head coaching job in New York for the Giants. So this one, to me, is interesting because they replaced him with Ken Dorsey, who's been the quarterback coach for Josh Allen the last 3 seasons. I don't expect much to change with the scheme and the style of offense that the Bills are going to be running this year. However, the in-season play calling may change. When we're talking about a mastermind like Daboll, who has been one of the better play callers over the last few seasons. And now we're switching. We're putting Josh Allen. He has a new voice in his headset, a new brain calling the plays in different situations. I wouldn't put too much stock into it, but that is definitely a big loss for the Bills, as Dable was widely considered one of the best offensive minds in football. So interesting note there, but I'm not going to put too much stock into that, as they still are running the same scheme. On the Rams side of the ball, they did lose their offensive coordinator, Kevin McConnell. He did go to the Minnesota Vikings and took their head coaching role. So they replaced him with Liam Cohen. And Liam Cohen was a former coach under Sean McVay. 2 seasons ago, he was there for, I think, 3 years total before taking the offensive coordinator role at Kentucky. He did that for 1 season before getting a call back from McVay to come work under him as the Rams offensive coordinator this year. So there's a lot of familiarity there. I don't expect much to change with this offense, as Sean McVay does call the plays. So don't expect much of a change from what you're going to see from the Rams this season, but wanted to at least point out how they intend to replace McConnell because he did join the Vikings. Let's move on to the injury report. It is week 1, so this isn't too robust at this point, but there are a couple things that I want to point out before we dive into the game itself. The Rams, the only player listed on the injury report is Van Jefferson. He is the wide receiver 3 for the Rams. He did not practice Monday or Tuesday ahead of the game for Thursday, so his availability is very much in doubt. We have him marked out as doubtful. I don't expect him to play. If he does not play, Ben Skoranek becomes a great value on this slate because he will be filling in for Jefferson in that wide receiver 3 role. You can also expect Tutu Atwell to get some run there as well. Atwell will be a lot less owned than Skoranek will be, but definitely something to keep an eye on as we get closer to kickoff on Thursday. On the Bills side, honestly, there really isn't too much. The only concern really is Quentin Morris. He's the tight end 3 for the Bills. When you're talking about a showdown slate, every player on the 53-man roster on both teams can definitely play a factor, so I wanted to point it out here. But the likelihood that Quentin Morris would have much of an impact on this game to begin with was pretty low. But it is something to keep in mind just in case you were looking to take a flyer. It does not look like he will play, as he did not practice Monday or Tuesday as well. All right, let's move on to the game and how I see things playing out. The Bills opened as a 1-point favorite when the lines first came out. That has now moved to -2.5. The over-under opened at 52. That moved to 52.5. So not much change in the over-under. But I think it's important to note the move on the Bills from -1 to -2.5. For betting purposes, not so much. It's not really crossing the 3-point threshold. But for DFS, it kind of gives us a glimpse into potentially what our competition may be viewing, how the competition may be viewing this game. It appears that the public likes the Bills in this game, thinks that they may have a slight advantage over the Rams. So we could potentially use that information to our advantage. Again, it's not going to be, this isn't a huge line movement, nothing that would, ring any alarm bells, but it does give us a little bit of insight into how our competitors may be building for this game. So something to keep in mind. I mentioned both teams last year were top 10 last season in DVOA on both sides of the ball. These are just 2 elite teams. They're expected to be in contention towards the end of this season. They were there last season, and this game is just going to be a joy to watch. And I really hope that we get the result that we are anticipating. I think if you played this game out thousands of times, you would expect to see a higher scoring game. Both offenses are very competent. They're returning a lot of the same players. You have elite quarterbacks on both sides of the ball with elite skill players on the outsides. I would expect that there would be a high-scoring game a good amount of the time. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen or it's more likely than our opponents may be building for. There are definitely paths to be building for when we're constructing our rosters for the Thursday night game. It's very possible that this game maybe goes under and turns into more of a slugfest where a lot of the scoring may be done on the ground. Different ways to think about the overall landscape of the game is going to give us an edge over the competition who is just building, assuming that it's going to be a shootout. So keep that in mind when you're building throughout the week and leading up to Thursday night. Think about how our competition is going to be building their lineups. And think about where there may be inefficiencies that we can take advantage of. And I'll get a little bit more into that as I go through the teams a little bit more in detail here. But I love playing Showdown, especially early in the season, because people are way too confident in their perceptions of how the game and how the teams are going to play out. Because to be honest with you, nobody knows. We just haven't seen these teams in action in well over, 6 months at this point. Things have changed. So keep that in mind. As I mentioned, projections are fragile. So let's not put too much stock into how the most likely thing to play out. Let's also keep in the back of our mind how things can definitely differ and how we can take advantage of that. Okay, let's get into the Rams. So I'm going to go through position by position, the skill players. I'll leave the quarterback to the end. I'm going to go through and break down each position group for each team and how I see each player on the slate, how I see them, showing up and how we can take them into account when we're rostering players, right? So for the Rams, on running back, it's a little bit of a muddied situation. You have Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, similar to what you had last year. There were injuries for both of them throughout the season. But I truly see Akers as the running back one, the workhorse in this offense. I would guess, if I had to say, he will get between 15 and 18 touches, with Henderson getting the rest, call it 6 to 10. Obviously, that isn't a normal game flow that we're expecting, but things can change. If the Rams get down early, they might not be running the ball as much. They'll lean more pass heavy. So there's a lot of things that can change, but in the most realistic and normal way that this game would play out, that's where I would see Akers around the 15 to 18 touch point. I'm not too concerned about Henderson taking over that role, but I also will admit that I don't know for sure. I mean, Sean McVay likes to keep things close to the vest, and he said that both running backs will play. So if you want to bet on Henderson being the lead back, that is a great way to get leverage on the field, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I see Akers as the running back one for this Rams group, who is going to get the bulk of the carries, somewhere in the 70-30 breakdown, in my opinion. Moving on to the wide receivers, it's very straightforward for the most part. There's not much I can really say about Cooper Kupp. Obviously, he's one of the best receivers in the game. He's going to put up elite numbers. It's in similar, almost exact role as he was last year in the exact same offense with the exact same quarterback. There's no reason to think that he's not going to have another great season. What I will say is his price point at $12,400 in the flex here, if we're looking at the salaries, he's the highest priced player on the entire slate. Rightfully so, I would say. I mean, between him and Josh Allen. But for a wide receiver, the game flows are a little bit more fragile. Obviously, Kupp is a workhorse, a volume monster. His floor is usually pretty safe. But a stat line of, let's say 9 receptions for 90 yards, that's a pretty solid game, but that's only going to give you 18 points. That's not going to crack optimal captain. That's not going to crack the optimal roster at his price point. So when betting on Kupp, we're really hoping that he scores at least one touchdown, and he has the 100-yard bonus on DraftKings to really get him into that threshold where he's a must-play. I'm not going to tell you he's not a great play. He is. But for game theory purposes, there is an argument to be made to completely fade him because he's going to be the highest owned player likely on the slate, and he's the highest priced player on the slate. So I would call this an inflection point on the slate. What I mean by inflection point is this is the decision that's going to make or break you for the slate in general. Be aggressive. With whatever you decide, be aggressive with that decision, because it is going to be something that you'll look back on, and it's going to be the reason you won or lost. Cooper Kupp can go off at any point in time. But like I said, a good game for him may be a failure when it comes to his price this week. So play aggressively. We're playing for first place in GPPs. If you decide to fade him, you're automatically going to differentiate your lineups against the competition. I'm assuming he's going to be close to 25% owned on the captain, and he's probably going to be close to 50, 60, 70, maybe 60, 70% in the flex. So if you're able to come to grips with fading him, you're automatically going to be differentiating your lineups. You're going to be saving salary in places where others won't be able to, and your lineups will automatically be different from the field. And this is extremely important in showdown contests when there's a limited selection on the player pool. You need to make sure that your lineups are standing out against hundreds and thousands of opponents potentially in these mass multi-entry tournaments. Okay, that's enough on Cooper Kupp. Let's move to Allen Robinson. I love this pickup, like I said, for the Rams. He's going to be filling the Robert Woods / OBJ role last year. The wide receiver 2 in this offense is historically been a great producer, especially if the Bills intend to double team Cooper Kupp. This is going to be an excellent opportunity for Allen Robinson to show out on the national stage and show why he's been overlooked, because he's been in 2 pretty bad offenses over the course of his career so far to date. So love this play. I think he might go overlooked a little bit at his price point. We'll see. Keep an eye on ownership projections as we get closer to the start of the slate. But at 6,200 with his projected median total here on FantasyLabs, I really, really like the way Allen Robinson sets up for this game and is extremely great leverage off of Cooper Kupp. What I mean by leverage, for those of you who don't know, I kind of referenced it a little bit earlier, but if a lot of the field is going to be playing Cooper Kupp and Cooper Kupp happens to have a depressed game or a down game, who's likely to benefit from a down game from Cooper Kupp? Allen Robinson makes a lot of sense, right? Because if they're double teaming Cooper Kupp, Robinson opens up more opportunities, especially in the red zone. He could have a 2-touchdown game and catapult you to the top of the lineup, or the top of the leaderboards at half, maybe a third of the ownership of Cooper Kupp. So definitely like Allen Robinson as a play and a pivot off of Cooper Kupp. Excuse me. The wide receiver 3, I talked about it in the injury section. It's Van Jefferson on the depth chart, but he's likely not going to play. So Ben Skoranek becomes a very popular a very popular replacement. At his price point, he's going to be very popular given his projection. So if you are going to be going the Ben Skoranek route here at 1,800, just make sure that you are keeping in mind the cumulative ownership of your rosters and making sure that you are building appropriately. Okay, let's move on to the Bill side of things. Running back is going to be pretty tricky. There's 3 running backs that are likely to get work for the Bills. So it's a very interesting situation. You have Zach Moss, who's always in the picture, who's annoying, who steals a lot of touchdowns but doesn't get a lot of volume. Devin Singletary, who's listed as the running back 1, but also doesn't get a lot of goal line work. And then they drafted rookie James Cook, who is likely to also get work. So you have 3 running backs who are going to be getting a mixture of work. It's just a tough situation to predict. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know who the best play of those 3 are. I don't. Anyone who tells you that they do is lying to you. But what I'm going to say to you again, play aggressively. Make sure that you are putting yourself in position for first place. And don't, unless you're playing 150, 250 lineups for a Thursday night game, I wouldn't recommend playing market weight ownership across all 3 of them, because you're going to end up in a situation where you're eating into your winning combinations if you get stuff right in other spots on the rosters, right? So make sure that you are keeping that in mind when you are building rosters. Be aggressive, pick a spot, and go for it. No regrets, play for first place. Wide receiver for the Bills, you obviously have Stefon Diggs, who's the wide receiver 1. Not really too much to say there. He will probably be matched up against Jalen Ramsey in this game. It's going to be fun to watch. I can't tell you exactly how it's going to play out, but think of how the game is going to go. Think of the game flow and who is going to be the likely beneficiary if things go one way or the other. So if Jalen Ramsey happens to lock down Stefon Diggs, who's likely beneficiary from that? Gabe Davis, right? The wide receiver 2, who had a great playoffs last year, who really shined down the back half for the Bills, who is coming on strong. His price to me is a little high for this slate. I will not probably be playing much of Gabe Davis. But if you want to bet on the scenario that Diggs gets shut down by Jalen Ramsey, this is a great option for you to pivot. His ownership will be a lot lower than Diggs. So again, just constantly thinking through game flows, thinking about how we want to attack the slate based on if this happens, how are we going to put ourselves in position to win if we get that scenario right. At tight end for the Bills, you do have Dawson Knox. His price is absurd in my opinion, $6,800. I will not be going there. I failed to mention wide receiver 3, Isaiah McKenzie for the Buffalo Bills. Fantastic value at $2,400. He was questionable throughout the week. Keep an eye on the injury report, but he did practice Monday and Tuesday and is trending to play. At $2,400 price tag, he is in a fantastic spot. The Bills used 3 wide receiver sets at 71% of the snaps last year. So he's going to be on the field a lot. He should get plenty of opportunities. At $2,400, he's one of the best values on the slate. He will be popular again, so keep in mind the total ownership numbers, but he's a fantastic play at his price. I mentioned Dawson Knox, $6,800. He's a low upside, low ceiling guy who relies on touchdowns. I won't be going there. If you want to pay up to be different, that's fine, but $6,800 is a little too rich for my blood at the tight end position for Dawson Knox. Last segment here, I want to talk about my top choices for captain and who my Berryman behemoth of the night is going to be. Josh Allen, the Berryman behemoth of the Thursday night game this week. Top projected point scorer on the entire slate. This guy is truly a unique talent. I don't need to tell you how good he is. He's the highest projected points on the slate for captain at 36.5, nearly 5 points clear of Cooper Kupp, who would be my second choice here at captain. He will be popular, but a solid play at $18,600 for the captain spot. The last 3 would be Matt Stafford, Stephon Diggs, and Allen Robinson. I touched on them throughout the video. So go with what you think is going to provide you with the most upside. Captain is not going to be the place to get tricky, guys. Play the best plays in the captain spot and differentiate your lineups elsewhere. I'll leave you with this. Projections are fragile. Let's make sure that we're building our lineups for first place. Be aggressive. These massive multi-entry tournaments require differentiation for you to have a chance at winning the top prize. Don't be afraid to leave money on the table. Experiment with different stacking options. So 5 Bills, 1 Rams, 4 Bills, 2 Rams, 5 Rams, 1 Bills. Get creative because you're going to have to be different to win these contests. Give me a follow on Twitter if you have not. My handle is at 13ERRYMAN. It is just Berryman, but instead of the B, it is a 13. Guys, I appreciate you watching this video. I will be back next week to break down the Thursday night game. Good luck Thursday night. Good luck in your week 1 full slate contest, and we will see you next week. Thanks, guys.